open your book to page 58. If you are not on page 58, you need to get there quickly. Okay, this lesson is called How Seed Plants Reproduce. So we're going to learn how do plants with seeds make new plants. Look at the picture while I read the look and wonder. Some beaches are filled with coconuts, just like this one. How can a plant grow from a coconut on the sand? So that's a think about it. That's a wonder. We're not going to talk about it out loud. Think, how can a plant grow out of a coconut on the sand? So we're going to learn a little bit about how. Okay, go ahead and turn to page 60. And I think what I'm going to do from now on is I'm going to add a stick into the cup for me. Just because I can read a little bit faster, not because you can't read fast, but because I've been reading for 25 years now, and you've been reading for 3 to 4, 5 years. So, just because I'm reading fast, does that mean that you guys should read fast?
No.
No, because I've been reading for 25 years. When you guys have been reading for 25 years, then you will be able to read a little bit faster out loud. But that does not mean anything bad that you have to read slow. You are, in the grand scheme of things, you are new readers. And that's okay. You are not supposed to be as good at reading as somebody who's been reading for 25 years. Yes, sorry, quickly.
And even though you still stumble when you read too.
Exactly. So, is it a bad thing when you stumble when you read? No. You just have to make sure that you slow down and don't get upset or frustrated and just try again. Yes, Colin, quickly.
She didn't say was sorry, so.
Okay, so look at page 60. Put myself in the cup. I'm number 13. Oh, first one I picked. Okay, I'm going to start with the main idea on the top left of page 60. The main idea of this lesson is seed plants make and store seeds in flowers and fruits or cones. The seeds can produce new plants. So now in this lesson we know we're going to learn all about that. How do plants store their seeds in flowers, fruits, or cones? And how do they produce new plants? Okay, let's start reading on page 60. Make sure that you are following along. Ethan, make sure that you are following along. Use your finger to help you follow. How do we classify seed plants? What are some of the plants you see every day? Chances are they are seed plants. Grasses, trees, and other seed plants grow from seeds. A seed is a plant that is not fully formed. Okay, well there's our first vocabulary word. It is the word seed, which is a plant that is not fully formed. So remember, that means a seed is a plant. If you have an apple seed in your hand, that is a plant. It's just not fully formed yet. Is a fully formed apple plant? Is it another apple or is it the apple tree? Think about it. The fully formed living thing that comes from an apple seed. Is it another apple or is it the whole tree? Aaron? The whole tree. Very good. The apple just comes from that tree. Good. So the apple itself is not the plant, it's part of the plant. The tree is the plant. Yes?
Tree makes other seeds.
Exactly. So apples are a plant that stores their seeds in its fruit. Okay. The coating of a seed protects the plant inside. There are about 250,000 species of seed plants. How would you classify all of them? What would you look for? Well, let's find out. Read next. Zari. Loud and slow. Notice, even though I've been reading for way over half my life, I still read very slow. So, you too. Go ahead.
Compare seeds and structures. Seeds come in all shapes and sizes. You can use those different to classify
Differences.
seed plants. A watermelon has many flat, slippery seeds. A peach has just one seed or one pit. That is hard and round. A cherry seed is smaller and smoother.
So, not only do scientists classify plants by the way they look on the outside, Ethan, sit up, pay attention. They also classify plants by what the seed looks like. So a watermelon has flat, slippery seeds. So that means there is a group out there of plants with flat, slippery seeds like a watermelon. A peach has a big pit in the middle, and it's hard and it's rough. Have you ever seen a peach pit? It's not smooth. It's very rough, and it's got like these little holy looking things in it. So that means there's a group out there that has one big seed that is kind of rough and hard. And then cherries have a pit in the middle, but it's much smaller and it's smooth. It doesn't have those that rough surface. So there's a group out there of plants that have one small, smooth seed. And then there's lots of other groups too that they didn't even mention, because think of like strawberries. What do their seeds look like? They're teeny tiny, and they're on the outside of the fruit. They're not on the inside. They're on the outside. So, and they're teeny tiny. So there's a group of plants that has teeny tiny little seeds that are on the outside. And there's lots more. We could go on for all day long thinking of different types of seeds, but we have to keep going. So if we have time, you can tell me later. Zari, keep going.
Plants that make seeds also have roots, stems, and leaves. These parts can be very different among the plants. They can also help you classify seed plants. Coconuts are giant seeds that come from center palm
Not
trees.
center, but what is that word, Zari? Not center.
Coconuts are giant seeds that come from
There you go.
certain palm trees.
So that means some seeds aren't even inside the fruit. Because like a coconut is a seed. It doesn't have seeds inside of it. It doesn't have seeds all over it on the outside. It is the seed. So sometimes the seed is what we know best. Keep going.
The trees are tall and sturdy, with woody stems. Watermelons and grapes grow on vines.
So what they meant by that sentence was, even though all seed plants have roots, stems, and leaves, they can still look very different. because a watermelon is a seed plant, but have you seen a watermelon plant in real life? It's like a vine. It grows on a vine.
Hmm?
Well, a coconut is also from a plant that has seeds. But do a coconut tree and a watermelon vine look the same at all? No, but they still have all the same things. They have a seed, they have a stem, they have a root, and they have leaves. And then does a blackberry bush look anything like either of them?
No.
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 So just because they all have the same parts doesn't mean they look the same. And again, that's why we have to classify them. But the more different they look, the easier it is to classify. Okay, very good, Zari. Go ahead and read next. Kingston, loud and slow. Zari, you did a great job reading slow. And also, I want everybody to notice how as Zari was reading, because she was reading slowly, she was able to think, oh wait, I'm sorry, I read that wrong. Let me fix it real quick, instead of having to wait for me to say it. So when you read slow, you can also catch your mistakes and fix them without somebody else having to say something. So good. Kingston, go ahead, loud. I know you can do it.
We can also classify seed
Oh, don't forget about the subtitle.
flowers and colors. We can also classify seed plants by where they store seeds. Most seed plants have flowers that bear fruit.
That's right. Bear is another way to say make or have or show.
The fleshy tissue of the fruit protects the seed inside.
Good. So if you've ever seen an apple tree before it blooms, you'll see that there's a lot of flowers all over it first. That's because the fruit actually comes from those flowers. So the apple tree flowers, and then as those flowers kind of disappear, the fruit, the apple, grows from where that flower was. So that's how most seed plants store their seeds, inside that fruit that comes from the flower, like apples and peaches and cherries and things like that. But that's not always how they store their seeds. Kingston, keep going.
Have you ever seen a pine cone? Pine cones are from conifers. A conifer is a seed plant that has no flowers or fruit.
So, what are conifers? What are conifers? Smith?
Conifer is a seed plant that has no flowers or fruit.
Good. So that means it has seeds, it has a stem, it has roots, it has a leaf, it has leaves, but it has no flowers and no fruits. So it's not like an apple or a peach or anything like that. It's like a pine cone. A pine cone comes from a conifer. Thank you, Kingston. Go ahead and read next. Ethan, loud and slow.
If they have no,
Louder.
if they have no fruit, where do conifers store their seeds?
So we know what we've read so far is that most seed plants have flowers and fruit, and the seed is stored inside the fruit. But conifers don't have a flower or a fruit, so where did their seeds come from? Ethan, keep going.
There's pine trees and other conifers.
Yeah.
Bear seeds on the surface of cones. Every conifer has male and female cones. The male cones are smaller than females.
Good. Pause. So, is there such thing as a male pine tree? And is it separate from a female pine tree? Can you have some pine trees that are males and some pine trees that are females? Victoria? Why?
Because
Who can help her out? Why? Zari?
Because every conifer has a male and a female cone.
Good. because each conifer has both male and female cones. Let's look at the picture on the top of page 61. It says, which pine cone is the female? Which is male? Who thinks they can answer that question? You all have the tools to be able to answer it. Carla?
The one at the end.
The end of the
It's
branch? So the ones all the way to the left on the book? Is that what you're talking about? The more yellowy ones?
Right.
Are you talking about the ones that are a little more yellow?
It's the one that have the pointing out and they kind of like.
Okay, so yes, which ones are those?
That one is a male.
Good. How do you know that, Carla?
I know that because it's in the black and white text.
And what does it say that tells you exactly that those little yellowish ones on the end are male? What does it say?
It says the male cone produces a yellow pattern.
Oh, we're not quite there yet. We're not quite there yet. So what did we read before that tells us that those smaller ones are male cones?
The male cones are smaller than the female.
Good. So we know that the smaller ones in this picture at the top of page 61, you should be looking at that, the picture's not here, are the male cones because they're smaller than the female cones. That means that big cone all the way to the right in your book is a female cone. Well, there's another way we know that those smaller ones, those small yellowish ones, are male cones. Ethan, keep reading to tell us why they look a little bit more yellow. Ethan, you just read. Where did you stop and then start again? That's why you got to pay attention.
Male,
Louder.
the male cones produce a yellow pattern for pollen.
A little slower. You're going too fast.
A gust of wind can blow pollen grains from a male cone to a female. If the pollen lands on a female cone, the seeds develop green.
Good. So they also look, they're smaller, which tells us they're male, but then they look a little bit yellower. We know that the male cones are the ones that produce pollen, and we all know this. What color is pollen, class?
Yellow.
Yellow, because it covers everything in the spring. So the male cones also will look a little more yellow. Well, what happens when the wind blows? What happens when the wind blows? Colin?
The pollen goes everywhere.
The pollen goes from the male cone to where?
The ground.
Victoria? Louder.
The female cone.
To the female cone. So the wind blows that pollen from the small male cone to the large female cone. And once the pollen lands on the large female cone, what happens, Victoria?
Develops.
Develops what?
There.
What develops? Develops is a verb.
The pollen.
The pollen develops. Develop is a word that means creates or makes. The pollen is already there. The pollen has landed on the female cone and something develops. What is it, Zadie?
The seed.
The seeds. So, the male cone has the pollen. The wind blows it onto the female cone. And then the female cone develops seeds. It's just like in real life. Women are the ones that have the babies. Right? They do. They have the babies. They carry the babies before they're born. After they're born, Carla, it's not snack time. Put it away, please. Even if you're at home, you have to follow the same rules, okay? So just like the woman carries a baby, well, for a plant, the seed is the baby. So where is the seed in a pine cone? Is it on the male cone? Or is it stored in the female cone, Zari?
It starts on the male cone.
Does the seed start on the male cone? Does the seed come from the male cone, Zari?
No.
The pollen comes from the male cone. Pollen and seeds are not the same thing. The wind blows it onto the female cone, and then what develops?
And the baby starts to develop.
Well, what is it? It's not a baby.
The seed.
The seed. So seeds develop and are stored in the female pine cone. Put your pencil down. At the bottom, we have a picture of a pine forest, and we just have a fun little fact that conifers grow well in cold climates. Okay, go ahead and turn the page.
Miss Fellas,
Yes, sorry.
one quick question.
Okay.
How come the female
Carla,
pine
hand
cones
down
are
until
bigger
Zari's finished.
than the smaller one?
What did you say?
Bigger than the males.
Say that again.
How come the females are bigger than the male?
I don't know that, probably because pollen is a lot smaller. So the male cone doesn't have to be as big to hold it and store it and develop it, whereas seeds are a little bigger. I don't know if that's true. That's just what I would think based on how nature works. But in order to know that, I'd have to do some research.
Okay.
Okay. Carla, do you have a question? Okay, because I said, Carla, I said put your hand down until Zari's finished. Because if your hand is up, even like this, you're thinking about your question instead of thinking about Zari's question and my answer. So make sure, this goes for everybody. If somebody else is asking a question or if I am speaking, your hand is down. Make sure you're listening to what the person talking is saying, not thinking about your question. Okay, Carla, quickly, because we only have 30 minutes to finish this lesson today.
Facts on page 16 says, in nature, all fruits have seeds.
That is true. All fruits have seeds. That is what makes them a fruit. Because if a plant has a fruit, that's where it stores its seeds. Okay, on page 62, Victoria, go ahead and read loud and slow and make sure your face is facing towards all of us. So that means you might have to move your book. If it goes on top of your vocabulary notebook, that's okay because you don't need it this minute. What kids will usually do is kind of as they need it, they'll just pull their vocabulary notebook out. They'll keep it under their book, and then when they need it, they'll just pull it out.
How do seeds,
A little louder.
how do seeds form? Think about a delicate red rose or a colorful tulip. Flowers may look pretty or smell nice, yet they do not make food for a plant. What is the job of a flower?
So they don't make food. What's their point? Well, Victoria, keep reading and we'll find out.
Yes,
The RE at the beginning is a prefix. Whenever we see RE at the beginning as a prefix, we say it like re. Cover up the RE and what word do you have?
reproduction.
So close. Reproduction. There, because you just forgot the C there. Don't forget the C.
Reproduction. You know that all living things can make little of their
That's part of being a living thing. In order to be considered a living thing, that organism must produce more of its kind. That's one of the 5 life functions. So that means plants have to be able to form new of their kind, more of their kind. Remember it says the life function is, does it reproduce? Well, reproduction is the process of reproducing, but we need a little more clarity. So keep reading. Actually, that was 2 paragraphs, so, but you might have more chance. Oh, just kidding. I'm sorry, keep going.
reproduction is how living things evolve.
So what's our next word, Victoria?
Reproduction.
Reproduction. Reproduction. Everybody, let's repeat after me. Reproduction.
Reproduction.
Again, reproduction.
Reproduction.
One more time. Reproduction.
Reproduction.
Okay, and what is reproduction, Victoria?
How living things like offspring.
So, how living things make offspring. Offspring is more of their kind, the baby or the new organism. Now this looks different depending on what kind of organism you are. So we're going to talk about what that looks like for a plant, a flowering plant. So a plant with a flower. Please read next, Zadie, loud and slow. Loud and slow. Aaron, loud and slow. Wait, down below.
Flowering plants use flowers to reproduce. Like cones, flowers have male and female parts.
So, just like a pine cone, just like a pine tree, are there separate boy flowers from girl flowers? Aaron? No, because they have both parts. Excuse me. Just like a pine tree. Okay, keep going.
The male part is the
Stamen.
stamen, which includes the another.
Not another, there's no O. So just cover up the THER. And what word do you have? An, like an. And then cover up the AN and you have the sound thir. So if you put them together, an, thir, you get anther. Not ander, anther. Anther, there you go. So pause. Let's look over at this parts of a flower diagram. Do you see the stamen? Those are those long, skinny things that are coming out. The anther is the little round thing at the end. You've probably seen plants that look just like this, like lilies around around Easter. They look just like this. You can see how they have the long, skinny piece that comes out, and there's like a little thick piece at the end, and it's usually very yellow. Why is it yellow, Aaron? What does it say next?
The female part of the flower.
Oh, it says it's the anther makes.
The anther makes pollen that has
Remember the E at the end makes that A long.
male.
There you go. You can skip that word. Male cells. So, put it on my desk. Pollen is yellow. So that's why the end, those anthers, you should have stood up, reached over, and set it on my desk. That's why the end of those stamens are very yellow. So think about when you see a lily at Easter. If you touch the end of those, it has the long skinny pieces that come out, and then there's like a round, thick piece at the end. If you touch that, you usually get yellow pollen on your finger. Well, that's because that is where the pollen is stored. Keep going, Aaron.
The female part of the flower is big.
No, there's no N. You're so close, but there's just no N. So
Pistil.
there Very go.
which includes the ovary.
Good. So if we look over here, we see the pistil is that kind of big, thick part in the middle. It's thicker at the bottom, and then it gets skinnier at the top. But it's not as skinny as the stamen. That is the pistil, the skinny part on the top, and then at the bottom, it contains the ovary. That's why it's thicker down at the bottom. Okay, Aaron, keep going. You can skip that word.
The pistil makes female flowering plants combine.
Oh, you skipped a line. It is not a bad word. It is a scientific word that you will have to say one day.
The pistil makes female cells or eggs.
Good. So the ovary is where the eggs are made. Did you ever think that a plant had eggs?
Mm.
It does. It does. Inside that ovary, on the pistil, at the bottom of the pistil, are where the female sex cells, which are called eggs, are stored. Very good. Keep going, Aaron.
The ovary stores the eggs.
So, what's our next word, Aaron?
Ovary.
Ovary. And what is an ovary?
To reproduce flowering plants combine.
Oh, is that what an ovary is? What does an ovary do? It's a part of a plant that does what?
Stores eggs.
The part of a plant that does what?
Stores eggs.
That stores eggs. So yes, flowering plants do have eggs.
To reproduce, flowering plants combine male and female cells. How do those cells join together?
So, reproduction, please be mature. Reproduction happens. The pollen, which is the male sex cell, has to get to the egg in a plant, which is the female sex cell. So how does that happen? How does it get from the anther all the way down to the bottom of the pistil and into the ovary? How does it happen? Well, Michaela, read next and tell us how. Pull your mask down and read loud. You have to read loud because this is a very important paragraph in this chapter. Hint, hint, everybody. This is a very important paragraph in this lesson. So, Michaela, make sure you're reading loudly. Okay?
Pollinate.
Wait, not pollinate. T-I-O-N makes the shun sound. Anytime you see T-I-O-N, it's going to make the shun sound. So what is that word? Not pollinate, but
Pollination.
pollination. Loud.
A gust of wind can blow pollen from another
Not another. What is that? It's not an O.
from another
Cover up the T-H-E-R. And what do you have? Can't hear you.
and
And. Cover up the A-N. And what do you have? Thir. So, an, thir. Put it together and you have anther. So, one thing that could happen, one way that it could, that the pollen could get all the way from the pistil down to the bottom of, from the anther all the way to the bottom of the pistil into the ovary, is the wind could blow it. Just like with the pine cone. The wind blows the pollen from one part of the flower to another. But that's not the only way because it's not always that windy. So what's another way, Michaela?
more often plants
Rely.
rely on birds instead,
Insects.
insects,
Go slow, Michaela.
or other pollinators.
Good.
Pollinators are animals that carry pollen from one flower to another.
I see a lot of people that are not reading along, and they're going to be lost. So pollinators are animals that somehow bring the pollen from one part of a plant or flower to another. How can they do that? Keep going, Michaela.
For instance, bees suck up nectar and sugar.
Not and sugar.
Or sugar.
Not. Remember, if you see a dash, that means pause. It's telling you what that is. So start again with for instance. If you see a dash, it means pause because it's about to tell you what it is, and then it's going to go back to what it was saying.
For instance, bees stick up
Nope.
nectar.
You had it right the first time. There's no T or I.
For instance, bees suck up nectar.
Which is?
A sugar liquid inside a flower. If the bees touch another,
Not another. Go slow, Michaela. Do you see how, when you're reading the first part, and then the second part, and then guessing at what it is? But is that what the word is? No, you have to read the whole word. The whole word. A lot of you are doing that. Same with this word. Some of you are reading this part and guessing the middle. But is that the word? No. So you have to read the whole word. Not the beginning and the end and guess the middle, but the whole word. So read if the bee.
if the bee touches an anther, pollen sticks to its body and legs. At the next flower, the pollen falls from the bee to the pistil. The progress of
Not progress. You're doing it. You're doing it again.
the process
There you go.
of moving pollen is called pollination.
Good. So Michaela, what's our next word?
Pollination.
What is it?
Pollination.
That you're read the whole word. You said it right when you just read it. So what is that word? Remember the T-I-O-N makes the shun sound.
Pollination.
Pollination. Pollination is our next word. And what is it? What is this? Or what is pollination?
The process of moving pollen.
The process of moving pollen. Very good. So we have, it can either be wind, blowing the pollen from the anther to the pistil. Are you following and are you writing this? Because I haven't seen you do it once. So you better show me. One way could be a gust of wind blowing the pollen from the anther into the pistil. Another way is an animal comes by, or an insect, or a bird. Well, an animal is a bird. A bird is an animal. So it could be an animal or an insect that comes by, and like the bee, it lands on the flower, drinks the nectar. It brushes up against that anther with the pollen, just like at Easter when you touch that part of the flower and then you have yellow stuff on you. Well, the bee does that, but bees actually have fur. If you look really close, bees are kind of furry. So the pollen sticks to its legs or to its little furry body. It flies to the next flower to drink pollen, and when it's there, the pollen falls off of its little furry body and lands on the pistil. So then that plant is pollinated. The pollen gets from the anther down into the pistil to the ovary where the eggs are. Bees are not the only ones that do this. Birds do it. If a cat is walking next to a flower, it may brush up against it and get pollen on its fur, and then it's brushing up against multiple flowers, so then the pollen is falling off onto the the pistil of another plant. Humans can do this too. If you're touching the lilies, you're getting yellow on you, but also some of it is falling off into the pistil. Yes, Zadie, quickly.
I was watching a thing on Sunday where they said that's what they do when they grow vanilla.
Mm-hmm.
They have to do it themselves.
Sometimes they do, because especially if like the animals are starting to die out because of things, or maybe there aren't as many bees, and probably, I know the bees are dying, which is really bad because the bees are our biggest pollinator. So if all the bees die, we're going to have to start doing it by hand. Can we do it as quickly as bees can? Or as easily? Mm-mm.
So they're getting extinct?
They're not quite there yet, but if it keeps going at this rate, they may one day. So yes, it's probably because of something going on in the environment to where they're pollinators, there aren't as many of them. So they are having to do it themselves. The farmers are having to do it themselves, which is a lot harder because a bee can go literally anywhere, right? But a farmer can only go in certain areas. So that means wild plants may become less and less and less, because that's how they have new plants. Okay, we only have one small little part, and then we are done for the day. Carla, go ahead and read next. Who just read? Michaela, good job, but you also had a long one, so I'll let somebody else read the last bit. So Carla, go ahead and read the last bit. Remember that T-I-O-N sounds like shun. Anytime you see T-I-O-N, it sounds like shun.
The next step for
Oh, don't forget the subtitle. Don't forget the subtitle, Carla.
Fertilizer.
Not fertilizer. You need to read the whole word. Do you see you're doing it? You're doing it too. So you read to here and then guessed the rest of the word. Fertilizer. But is that the word? Fertilizer? Or is it fertiliz?
10.
Don't forget this letter. Fertiliz or fertilize.
10. Fertilizer.
You're skipping a word. Look at the word or the letter that I'm pointing out right now. Fertilize a shun.
Shun.
Fertilize a shun. Carla, listen. Fertilize a shun. So what is that word?
Fertilize. Shun.
You're still skipping that A, Carla. It's not fertilize shun. That's not a word. It's fertilize a shun. So fertilize a shun. Put it all together. What is the word, Carla?
Fertilization.
Fertilization.
The next step in a seed formation is to move pollen to the
Ovary.
ovary.
This was a word that we already read. Anna had a pronunciation key, so you should be able to say it. Ovary.
Ovary. The pistil grows a long tube for the pollen to travel. Inside the ovary, the male cell.
You don't have to read that word. You can just skip it. So the male cell.
The male cell combines with a egg.
Fertilization
Fertilization occurs
occurs. Carla, go slow. Occurs.
when the male
You can skip it.
cell joins with the female cell.
Pause. What's our next word?
Our next word is fertilization.
Fertilization. I guess we're all going to have to say that together.
Fertilization.
Repeat after me. Fertilization.
Fertilization.
Again, fertilization.
Fertilization.
One more time. Fertilization.
Fertilization.
So, Carla, what is our next word?
Fertilization.
Good. And what is fertilization? We'll call it the process when what happens?
The process of a male cell joined with a female cell.
So the process of a male cell joining with a female cell. And Carla, as soon as you're finished writing that definition, you can finish reading.
Fertilization is the process that forms a seed.
Good. So once this happens, the male cell has joined with the female cell, a seed is formed. So really quick, we're going to look back at this diagram, but I'll give you all a chance to finish writing. So make sure you finish writing number 5. And then we're going to look at this diagram now that we know exactly how the pollen gets from the anther down the pistil to the ovary. We'll go through and we'll do it with our fingers. Okay, thank you, Smith. Okay, so let's look at this diagram on the top of page 63. We know that the male sex cell is at the end of that stamen. It's the pollen. The pollen, in order to create a new plant, has to get from the end of that stamen, from the anther, down the pistil to the ovary where the eggs are. We were like, how does that happen? Can the flower move its own parts to get it to where it needs to go? No, it can't. It can't. So what has to happen is either the wind blows the pollen to the pistil, where then it travels down that tube. There's a tube inside the pistil that goes down to the ovary, or a pollinator, an insect or bird or some other kind of animal, will rub up against the pollen, get it stuck to their fur or their feathers or their whatever, and then transfer it to another flower where the pollen will fall off onto the pistil, and then again, the pollen will travel down that tube through the pistil down to the ovary. This is called fertilization. Once it's in the ovary, that pollen will join with the egg and create a seed. So reproduction is how this happens. How does a plant make offspring? Well, first, pollination has to occur. The pollen has to move from one part of the flower to another. Once it is moved from one part of the flower with either a gust of wind or a pollinator, the pollen travels down the pistil, down to the ovary where the eggs are, they join together, and then it's a seed. So does everybody understand? Okay. Now, I'm going to pass out your homework. It's vocabulary. Sometimes you do have to read ahead when it's vocabulary. You don't have to read the whole lesson, but you need to be able to skim and find the key words and read around the key word. I'm going to pass it out.
Miss Bellis,
Yes.
have you seen the ones that the girls have on the screen? Because we showed you before science.
Not yet. But I
Okay.
will in a second. Now, for the rest of the quarter, that means until fall break, science vocabulary, well, really until we finish science, which we only have one more chapter after this. Science vocabulary only is optional. Vocabulary only is optional. That means you do not have to do this. If you do it and you get an A, you get an extra grade in Power School, which basically works out to being extra credit. If you don't do it, or you do it, and I start grading and I can immediately tell you're not going to get an A, well then I'm just going to give it back to you and say, here you go. Does everybody understand? It's a good idea to do it though, because it helps you study for your test. You have the option of potentially getting some extra, basically what works out to be extra credit. You have to do the front and the back though. I would do it unless you just absolutely run out of time. If your parents tell you you have to do it, well guess what? You have to do it. Okay, maybe I shouldn't have told you. Maybe I should have just told them. I think that's what I did with distance learners, and I should have done that with you guys too. But I'm going to tell your parents that it is optional. However, it is probably a good idea to do it. Because the vocabulary, as long as you're reading closely, is really pretty easy. You just have to read closely. So I would go ahead and do it.
My mom and dad are gonna.
It also means a lot because if it gets to the end of the quarter and your science grade is maybe not quite where you want it to be, but I see that you've done everything extra and you've really tried your hardest, guess what I'm going to do on my end? I'm going to bump it up a little. Because you did everything you were supposed to and you went above and beyond and did everything that was extra, even if you didn't have to. And so that shows me that you're working really hard and your effort is there. And maybe you messed up a little bit here and there, but overall you were trying your hardest, and effort means more than getting straight 100s without really thinking about it. So, go ahead, put that in return to school. That's the last I'm going to say about it. You can close your science books. Yes, Ethan, you still have to bring your science books home.
Yeah.